And we're back. So, everybody loved our October episode on the government shutdown so much, I decided to bring Vidyuth back on the podcast.
Okay.
How have you been recently?
Oh, it's been a while. Oh my god, it's been a while. I'm excited to be back though. We're gonna talk about Iran today. It's gonna be great.
All right, so let's start. To most, war is objectively bad, but it seems like the administration completely disagrees. From the rebranding of the Department of Defense, now the Department of War, to the anti-NATO sentiment from the president himself, the escalation of international intervention is seemingly expected. So, let's talk about Iran, what's going on, why we care, and what's happening right now. This is Beyond the Party Lines, Episode 7.
Historically, the country has been unstable. It started as a colony, evolving into a republic separated by the spheres of influence of Russia and Great Britain. During this time, domestic tensions built up involving a lack of trust in the Shah in delivering his promises. Protests erupted, and in 1906, the Shah called for the formation of a national assembly, a stark contrast from the strong dictatorship that was present before. This group convened in October of that year and began to draft their constitution, which, when paired with the supplementary fundamental law that was drafted a year later, created the core of the Iranian constitution today.
World War I saw the economic collapse for Iran, and Army officer Reza Khan decided to take over the country using the military as his vessel. He assumed the position as Shah and built infrastructure with the intention of fortifying the already very broken nation. He was monumental in the creation of the Trans-Iranian Railroad and the mandating of education across Iran, but he wasn't very strong in democratic values that represented the complete body of citizens. And World War II marked the start of his son's power, as he was seen as a liability due to his connections with Germany, given that Iran was crucial in maintaining the power of the British Navy. We see this again during the time in which Mohammad Mossadegh was in power as a prime minister, where he chose to spend his time nationalizing the oil supply instead of leaving it in the hands of the Brits. He founded the National Iranian Oil Company, but was removed from power by the CIA and British as he set an unwelcome precedent of Iranian nationalism that undermined Western authority in the Middle East.
The Shah, however, at the time kept his power and started what we call the White Revolution, prioritizing land reform, forest nationalization, women's rights. Very progressive movement at the time. However, this was all very much opposed by more conservative figures, such as Ayatollah Khomeini, who took over in 1979, marking the start of the Islamic Republic. Since then, the Republic, under the guise of Islam, has enacted laws that support, number one, the suppression of political dissent, gender apartheid, minority prosecution, violent crackdowns, and internet and media freedom. They have very much been against a lot of these values, something that we have seen for the past few decades, something that's not what would have happened under the White Revolution per se. Ayatollah Khomeini taking over set this precedent and has created that feel for the country today. So if we want to go into detail along each of these points, let's just talk about first the suppression of political dissent. Following the 1979 revolution, political opponents, including communists and leftists, were executed. Over 1.7 million people arrested or jailed in the 3 decades after the beginning of his time in power.
On gender apartheid, women are forced to wear the hijab, with penalties including prison for violations. Laws severely restrict women's rights regarding marriage, divorce, child custody, and travel, requiring male guardian permission.
And talking about minority prosecution, religious minorities, particularly Baha'is, face systematic discrimination, including bans on education, employment, and the destruction of temples. Ethnic minorities, including Kurds, Arabs, and Baluchis, face consistent prosecution as well.
Persecution. Violent crackdowns, during major uprisings such as in 2017, 2019, 2022, and 2025, have been met with violent repression, resulting in thousands of deaths and injuries. And the state tightly controls information, cutting internet access during protests to suppress the dissent.
So that's a quick summary, in a sense, about the history of Iran in general. Now we go on to talk about important checkpoints in the interactions between the U.S. and Iran. So As we talked about with Mohammad Mossadegh, we have the CIA-assisted coup of him. The U.S. and British intelligence agencies helped elements in the Iranian military overthrow him, the prime minister. As we talked about, this was mainly because he tried to nationalize the oil that came from Iran. Britain saw a huge amount of power and advantage economically in that, as did the U.S. And so him nationalizing and creating a name for Iran in that sense was deemed dangerous. This led London to impose an oil embargo on Iran, and it showed even back then that Western intervention was normalized.
And this coup brought back to power the Western-friendly monarchy headed by Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, and who was deeply unpopular among much of the population. He relied on U.S. support to remain in power until he was overthrown in 1979.
1979, a group of radical Iranian college students take 52 American hostages at the U.S. Embassy in Tehran, demanding that the United States extradite the Shah. Washington severs ties with Tehran, sanctions Iranian oil imports, and freezes Iranian assets. And after over a year, the hostages are finally released, which were signed just minutes after the inauguration of President Ronald Reagan, whose campaign emphasized Jimmy Carter's failure to release them. As part of the accords, the United States promises not to intervene in Iranian politics, but we know where that goes.
September 80 to August 1988, the Iran-Iraq War. Iraq invaded its neighbor and growing rival Iran amid fears of a Shiite revolt. Sorry, not very good. This revolt against Iraqi leader Saddam Hussein. And the U.S. supported secular Iraq with economic aid, training, and dual-use technology until the war ended in 1988, even after the CIA found evidence that Iraqi forces used chemical weapons. An estimated 1 million Iranians and 250,000 to 500,000 Iraqis died in this conflict.
In 1985, the Iran-Contra affair, despite an arms embargo, the Reagan administration secretly sold weapons to Iran to secure the release of 7 American hostages. The officials used that money to fund right-wing Contra's rebel groups in Nicaragua after Congress prohibited that. And Reagan takes responsibility for the scandal, and the affair ends in some convictions. Hezbollah, the group that kidnapped those hostages, killed 2 of them and releases the others.
April 18th, 1988, Operation Praying Mantis. After an Iranian mine nearly sinks an American frigate in the Strait of Hormuz, the Navy launched a retaliatory campaign called Operation Praying Mantis. American forces destroyed 2 Iranian oil platforms and sank a frigate. In July, the U.S. Navy shot down an Iranian passenger jet after mistaking it for a fighter jet, killing 209 people on board.
From 1992 to 1996, the United States ramped up sanctions against Iran under the Bush and Clinton administrations. In 1992, Congress passed the Iran-Iraq Arms Non-Proliferation Act, which sanctions materials that could be used to develop advanced weaponry. The White House expands sanctions with the complete oil and trade embargo in 1995, and the 1996 Iran and Libya Sanctions Act imposes an embargo against non-American companies investing more than $20 million per year in Iran's oil and gas sectors.
In 1998 to 2000, there was a truce negotiated by Secretary of State Madeleine Albright, who met with Iran's Deputy Foreign Minister at the 6+2 talks during the 1998 UN General Assembly. It is the highest level U.S.-Iran contact since 1979, and in April 2000, Albright acknowledged the U.S.'s role in overthrowing Mossadegh and calls previous policy toward Iran regrettably short-sighted. Although the United States does not explicitly apologize for the intervention, some sanctions against the country are lifted.
In 2002, during his State of the Union address, President George W. Bush describes Iran as part of an axis of evil, continuing this sentiment that Albright tried to stop previously. Along with Iraq and North Korea, these 3 made up that, quote, axis of evil. He says that Iran, quote, aggressively pursues weapons of mass destruction and exports terror, while an unelected few repress Iran's people's hope for freedom. In response, the Iranian government stopped secret meetings with the U.S. diplomats that are focused on capturing al-Qaeda operatives and combating the Taliban in Afghanistan.
September 2007. Oh, I was born. Tensions at the United Nations. During a speech at the opening session of the UN General Assembly, former Iranian President Ahmadinejad, I hope I'm right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Calls the dispute over Iran's nuclear program closed and says his government will disregard Security Council resolutions calling on the country to halt uranium enrichment. At a press conference afterward, he calls the Israeli government an illegal Zionist regime. A U.S. national intelligence estimate released in November found that Iran ended its nuclear arms program in 2003, but continued to enrich uranium.
In 2015, July, Iran and the European Union reached an agreement on Iran's nuclear program that is named the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. We're going to call that the JCPOA from now on. In return for sanctions relief, Iran agrees to undertake a series of steps, including dismantling and redesigning its nuclear reactor in Iraq, allowing for more intrusive verification mechanisms, and limiting uranium enrichment for at least 15 years. The deal is meant to increase Iran's breakout time for developing enough fissile material for a nuclear weapon from a few weeks to at least 1 year. Many Republican and some Democrat lawmakers oppose the deal, arguing that lifting those sanctions will bolster the Iranian government and allow for it to destabilize the region.
May 8, 2018, Trump pulls out of the JCPOA. President Donald Trump announced that the U.S. will withdraw from this organization and mount a sanctions campaign to place maximum pressure on Iran. Many arms control experts and European allies condemned the move, while many Republican lawmakers, Israel and Saudi Arabia, applauded. Iran responds by boosting uranium enrichment in defiance of the agreement's terms. And the withdrawal marks the beginning of rhetorical and military escalation with Iran under the Trump administration. May 2019 to October 2019, following the declaration of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps as a terrorist group, on June 13th, 2 oil tankers are attacked near the Strait of Hormuz about a month after 4 commercial ships are damaged in the same area. The U.S. blames Iran for the attacks, with Trump calling the country a nation of terror. The U.S. announces the deployment of 1,000 additional troops to the Middle East in response, and the IRGC shoots down a U.S. surveillance drone 2 days later. The U.S. again blames Iran for attacks on oil tankers in the region in the following months and tries to seize an Iranian vessel sailing near the British territory of Gibraltar.
And that leads us to today. So, what's happening? Well, Trump has ordered military strikes, effectively declaring war on Iran without permission from Congress. He, along with Israel, has bombed Iran continuously, the first bomb resulting in the killing of the supreme leader, Ali Khamenei. His son assumed power since his death, but the bombing hasn't shown signs of stopping, and it seems to be done sloppily. One incident in particular, when some airstrikes landed on a girls' school in Tehran, showed that they are not putting enough effort into executing these airstrikes to the best of their ability. It's being done pretty sloppily. And of course, social media has played a huge part in the war. Other countries, such as Iran and China, have demonized the actions of the U.S., while the White House has released videos of treating the war like a game, taking clips from video games such as Call of Duty and putting them over these bombings.
So, one remark I want to make on that is the comment that it is sloppily done, these bombings. So I wouldn't necessarily agree with that.
Yeah.
Because I think that if it really was sloppily, it would have been happening way more often. And like in the last 2 weeks, and you're saying so many bombs are being thrown, and we've heard one instance of a report like this of a girls' school. While it was a mistake, it wasn't a complete out of the blue mistake. It was one where they didn't do the due diligence, as that girls' school originally I believe was built as part of a military compound. Now, looking retroactively, it is obvious that it was no longer part of that compound, but I can see how. Again, I'm not excusing the actions, and I'm not debating the legality of the actions yet. I also believe that these strikes are not legal. But as far as saying they're done sloppily, I think unfairly blames the men and women who are on the front lines.
I will say,
yeah.
I do feel like I've been attacking Trump a little bit, but I'll rephrase to say that I think they could have been more careful. I'll say that. I think by sloppy, I mean there are some things where they could have done their due diligence, as you said, better. and there are people on the front lines acting, and I think around 6 people have died so far as a result of these airstrikes, and people or the government has honored them in that sense. They have been honored by the White House, by other people for their service. It is to say, though, that there are some actions that can be done that can prevent results like these from happening, although they are doing their due diligence for most of these strikes.
Okay. So before we move into the consequences of these actions, let's talk about why this happened, or how this happened, rather. So from what I know, okay, so actually, let's move. So while I'm not an artist, drew a beautiful map, I would say, of the Middle East. Hold this, of the Middle East. And then, I don't know, let's try to move this closer.
A few important places to point out. Obviously, Israel is over here. The U.S. and Israel are both doing these strikes. Oh, we're bringing it closer. We have Iran over here. The most important part of this map, however, is the Strait of Hormuz, which connects the Persian Gulf and the Gulf of Oman. The reason this is so important, which kind of gets us into the consequences of these actions, is because as a result of these airstrikes from the U.S. and Israel, and Iran returning the favor as well on U.S. bases around the Middle East area, this area has been practically restricted for ships to go back and forth. And this is incredibly important because, as we know, the Middle East is so incredibly important in the importing and exporting of oil around the world, right? If we look at, for example, ABC has said a lot about the possibility that oil prices will skyrocket because Iran supplies, or the Strait of Hormuz specifically, supplies about a quarter of all imports around the globe.
Not supplies, a quarter of the supplies move through the strait.
There we go. A quarter of the oil supply worldwide goes through the Strait of Hormuz. It's a very important means of passageway for oil in particular. And so to see this completely cut off restricts all the economies of course, the Middle East, but also of countries around the world that are dependent on gas, and families, as well as families in the U.S. that are dependent on gas.
And a little comment is that I heard that the U.S. was going to be releasing millions of barrels from their oil reserves. And while that might sound like a lot, that's enough. Those like 400 million barrels of oil is, I believe, enough to keep the world running for 4 days.
That's incredible.
4 days equals 400 million barrels of oil.
And it does just go to show that the Strait of Hormuz is incredibly important. But
let's admire this map right here.
So
isn't this beautiful, guys?
Completely to scale drawing around over here, by the way. Incredible.
So I'll admit, not my best work. I'm by no means an artist, but we didn't have a lot of space. We didn't have a lot of time.
Honestly, it was pretty good for that. So,
all right.
But okay, so let's talk about our thoughts. I obviously did not we didn't talk enough about the damage that Iran has done. And they have, obviously we talked about voter suppression and social media suppression and gender apartheid a lot. And that makes sense, obviously, in the context. It's not a good thing. The Iranian regime has continued to kill off protesters en masse. This is not something that's new to the region or to the country. It's something that needs to be fixed. And the U.S. decided to do that. They would decide to go in, kill the leader, and continue to wage war against Iran. Now, I will say, in my eyes, I think there is some good to getting rid of the Iranian leader. The person in power, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, was not a good leader. He created a lot of bad precedents and created a country of oppression.
But now we fall back into the issue with Maduro. Yes, while Maduro is a piece of shit, the Ayatollah may he actually be willing to rest in peace. No, the dead
We will
Ayatollah,
see.
the Ayatollah who has since passed since the start of the war, the one who's been threatening the U.S. for 5 decades and died on the first day. That guy and Maduro, both pieces of shit, both did terrible things to their country. But is it the U.S.'s jurisdiction to go do it? And I want to throw another wrinkle in here, which is, from what I've heard, it was Israel Netanyahu told Trump, we're going in on this day, with or without you. And Trump was like, shit, now we gotta go. So I think this was tied back into an Epstein episode we'll do later, but that refers to how much control and influence does Israel have over the U.S. system, either through direct, like Benjamin Netanyahu, or through super PACs like AIPAC, right? Where does all the influence and money come from? So, actually, yeah, what do you think? Do you think the U.S. is pressured into this attack, or do you think that Trump has been planning this for months?
Well, I honestly wouldn't know enough, but according to what you said, I'd have to assume that Trump was brought into this. We'll research, but I think if this is correct, it shows that Trump has been acting as a puppet for people like Benjamin Netanyahu. And here, let's just wait.
Oh, that's interesting.
So I think it looks like...
We'll come back to this later, but
okay,
according to this
is another
the
thing.
search and the Epstein files has dropped sharply since the attack on Iran started.
Again, it looks like Trump was ultimately behind him. I think it looks like Netanyahu is taking the lead on this simply because he's in the area. And he's talked a lot about, looking around and trying to gain power in the Middle East. And so having the U.S. backing that is incredibly important. They're one of the superpowers of the world at the moment. Having Trump's support on that can be very dangerous for people in the Middle East. With all of that said, I agree with Wenshi in that it does not seem reasonable for the U.S. to go in and conduct these strikes. It is bad what Ayatollah Khomeini has done to Iran. It was an incredibly strong country. It was becoming more equal in that sense, but in introducing Ayatollah Khomeini, it became a country of oppression, and that doesn't mean that it's not a good thing. But that doesn't give Trump the right to go in and attack that. And it seems like he's doing it to try to distract people from the Epstein files, perchance. Perchance. He is under attack a lot by the country. A lot. His approval ratings have gone down very quickly. And it's not that he's necessarily smart for doing this, but it's for him to kind of get out of the media and change that focus onto kind of the good things that he's doing, getting rid of a toxic leader like Maduro or Khomeini. But he's waging war, he's losing lives, and some of that money, he spent a lot of money on airstrikes, can go to our people here, America first, right? And additionally, as we talked about social media and the airstrikes, they're gamifying this. War is not a game. War is not something to laugh about. But they're doing that to desensitize us to the actions that the government is taking. That's my piece.
Yeah. Also, I remember their claims during the strike on Iran last year, where they struck the uranium enrichment sites. Remember this? The U.S.
Yeah.
So I believe that they found that, one, the U.S. strikes didn't do as much damage as they claim they did, but two, that these sites were also enriching uranium purely for energy, I believe.
I'm not sure. You might enlighten me.
I really need to do a fact check for this one, but
fact check number 2.
Iran enriching uranium for energy.
I think uranium can be used as a resource for nuclear weapons, I would have to assume. So I think even if they say, it's for civilian energy, they can still use it for nuclear weapons. They have been sanctioned, and a lot of their nuclear weapons have been taken away, but it's not to say that they can't develop. They are very much at a disadvantage when it comes to nuclear weapons.
Okay, so Iran. Oh my God, I'm sorry. Iran has been. First of all, it still says it's enriching uranium for civilian energy, but weapons grade uranium is 90% enriched. They are producing 60% enriched uranium, which is a short step from the weapons capabilities. And nuclear power plants also typically use a 3.5 to 5% enrichment. So the 60% enriched material actually is a far cry from the from civilian power. However, it's also important to say that Iran has also ramped up their production of this higher enriched uranium since the U.S. pulled out of the JCPOA deal in 2018.
2015 JC.
Yeah, the deal was in 2015 with Obama. Obama negotiated that one, I believe, and then 2018 Trump abandoned it, like he did a lot of stuff. Okay, so that's what we know so far. Just that right now, the U.S. and Israel claim that Iran has been very abusive towards people, and we've all seen the clips and the videos of the protests happening in Iran. So I guess the U.S. and Israel are trying to step in and stop the regime from, suppressing so many protests like it has before in recent decades. And I guess this comes back to my point in the Maduro episode, where it's like the right ending, but was it the right means? Like, are we doing the right thing the wrong way?
I mean, I'm not sure. I have much from Venezuela now. World's moving very fast, but I don't think Venezuela is exactly stable. They don't have. I mean, I think they do have a leader at the moment, not endorsed by Trump.
They do. They put him in, right?
They do have a leader, but I don't think he's endorsed by Trump. Or she. I don't.
No. She's not in charge of the country. They put Maduro as second in command in charge.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh, I thought he was getting surrendered or something.
For Iran, I get it's too soon to tell. Maybe Trump has a better vision for the world than we initially thought. Maybe he's doing this for oil or for personal glory. We know I'm tired. We're high schoolers. I'm tired. It's Saturday. I woke up too early for this. But let's talk about one last thing around this topic before we move on to the next topic, which will come in part 2 of today's episode, which will be the Epstein files. So, last thing we have to talk about today is the legality of these actions. Do we think that these attacks are illegal?
No.
I mean,
you're supposed to ask Congress before. I mean, I think.
Well, no president ever asked Congress before. Well, those are all for small. Strike. Even Maduro. I can concede that Maduro, Bin Laden were all small strike. Okay, actually, I digress. Bin Laden was approved by Congress for the war on terror.
Any kind of foreign intervention takes American resources.
Military intervention.
Any kind of American military intervention requires resources that could go towards the U.S. Therefore, I believe that all of them should be approved by the legislative branch. Yeah. However, that's done. It doesn't matter. It's, in my eyes, it was done badly, and we are seeing a lot of resources being blown on these airstrikes. For us, oil, obviously, but unless it's really going to economically benefit us, which it shows it's not going to. Apparently, if this war goes on, we are going to see very bad impacts for us, but also for other developing countries. It just seems like this is done without any reason.
All right. Oh, I agree with that. So, again, to reiterate, I don't believe that what they're doing is completely legal. I think that at a certain point, they need to ask Congress for permission. And if this is going to be a drawn-out conflict, which I believe it will be, you would think they want to do it now while they still have control of this House and Senate, which I'm predicting that they will lose control of at least one, if not both, houses of Congress in the midterms.
I believe New York Times did report that the Republicans in the House blocked a vote to limit his war powers in Iran. So
yeah, they did.
The Republicans are backing this, obviously.
Well, they're trying to. Actually, yeah. Wait, how much do we need to declare war? Congress majority. All right. So a simple majority in both the House and the Senate is required for Congress to formally declare war. So
I don't know
why?
why they haven't done
Yeah.
that. I guess they don't need to.
I mean,
I honestly don't
is this
know.
just Trump saying I don't need to? Is this him posturing, or is this because they believe that enough Republicans will switch sides? Because I'm pretty sure all Democrats will be against this. Does he think that enough Republicans are against this?
I think our House is so divided by party that any Republican would back them, any Democrat would oppose him. It's just as simple as that.
I mean, there are some Republicans who I think wouldn't back him, which is why I suspect that like potentially they don't think they have the votes.
I mean, I think that that's not. I guess no bill has been introduced quite yet. But if Trump wanted a bill to be introduced to declare war, I think he would.
Yeah.
But he also doesn't truly care that much. He wants to consolidate power in the executive branch. And that's kind of what we've seen in the
some
past.
posturing. Okay, well, this has been part 1 of today's episode on Iran. Next, we'll come to you in about a week or two with an episode on Epstein. This is Beyond the Party Lines, episode 7. Ethan Vidyuth signing off.